Welcome to Have You Read It, the channel where we bring books to life, one summary at a time. Today we're exploring When Women Ran Fifth Avenue, Glamour and Power at the Dawn of American Fashion by Julie Satow. This book shines a light on Hortense Odlum, Dorothy Shaver, and Geraldine Stutz, three pioneering women who steered major New York department stores through periods of significant change in the 20th century and reshaped American fashion. The prologue sets the scene. It's the height of the Great Depression, and Hortense Odlum, a suburban mother with no prior business experience, is about to step into the opulent world of Bonwit Teller. Her husband, Wall Street tycoon Floyd Odlum, has asked her to assess the struggling department store, a task that bewilders its current president, Mr. Bonwit. This sets the stage for Hortense's unexpected rise and the book's exploration of women's roles in the department store industry. The narrative then goes back to Hortense's earlier life. We learn about her humble beginnings in a pioneer town in southwestern Utah. She grew up in a small adobe home. Her mother ran a guest house to support the family while her father worked various jobs, often away from home. Hortense's upbringing instilled in her a sense of resourcefulness and a desire for a better life beyond the confines of her small town. Hortense's early adulthood involved two marriages, the second to Floyd Odlum, a lawyer. They moved to Brooklyn, New York. Despite embracing her role as a homemaker, Hortense felt the need to fit into New York society and had a disappointing experience buying a cheap, unflattering dress for a Thanksgiving dinner. This experience, as well as her upbringing, would later influence her approach to running Bonwit Teller. Switching gears, the book introduces Dorothy Shaver. In 1918, Dorothy arrives in New York City with her sister Elsie and a determination to make a career for herself. They start a doll business. After initial success, they get hired by Lord & Taylor. The history of department stores is presented, originating with Le Bon Marché in Paris and A.T. Stewart's Marble Palace in New York. These stores were visual spectacles offering a wide array of goods and services, but more importantly, they created unique female universes where women could shop, socialize, and work, often in positions of power. Maggie Lena Walker is highlighted. In 1905, Walker, an African-American businesswoman, opened the St. Luke Emporium in Richmond, Virginia. This department store aimed to serve the Black community and provide employment opportunities for Black women during the Jim Crow era. Despite initial excitement, the store faced financial challenges and racial discrimination, eventually closing after 7 years. Dorothy and Elsie Shaver's doll business, the Little Shaver's Shop, gained success after receiving an order from Lord & Taylor. However, Elsie tires of the business, leading them to close the shop. Dorothy then accepts a position at Lord & Taylor, supervising the comparison shopping department. Comparison shopping involved employees surveilling competitor stores to gather information on pricing and popular items. Dorothy, however, saw this as a ridiculous practice. She felt that the store should spend less time finding out what other shops were doing and pay more attention to developing its own business. The 1920s brought significant changes. Department stores saw a surge of sales because many Americans were flush with cash and looking to spend. Also, there were more women entering the workforce. This presented challenges for the department stores, especially for the saleswomen. Saleswomen worked long hours for low pay. Progressive values led to increasing scrutiny of working conditions for saleswomen. Sociologists and other activists, including women and suffragists, began to look at the plight of saleswomen. They began to spread awareness of the poor working conditions. Dorothy challenges the conventional mindset at Lord & Taylor, proposing a bureau of fashion stylists instead of comparison shoppers. Her idea is initially met with resistance, but she persists and begins her rise through the ranks at Lord & Taylor, eventually becoming a director and vice president. Lord & Taylor, established in 1826, had a new headquarters built. The move to this final location had cost Lord & Taylor more than it had anticipated. A consortium of banks extended a loan to the store, and as part of its restructuring, it installed Mr. Rayburn, Dorothy's relative, as its treasurer. Dorothy was given full-time employment on the store's management track. Dorothy then wanted something more than working at Lord & Taylor, and so she wanted to branch out into publishing, but he continued with his plan. The 1928 Exposition of Modern French Decorative Art at Lord & Taylor becomes a pivotal moment for Dorothy, solidifying her reputation as a visionary. The exposition showcases Art Deco furnishings and inspires American creativity, blurring the lines between art and commerce. Hortense is asked to assess Bonwit Teller. Hortense finds the store depressing. Despite her lack of retail experience, she starts suggesting improvements but is met with resistance. Hortense focuses on the millinery department, relocating it to a more prominent spot, and hat sales triple. Hortense is then made president. Meanwhile, Floyd Odlum, her husband, is having an affair with Jackie Cochran. At this time, Hortense was appointed president of Bonwit Teller in October 1934. At the time, the store was doing badly. But despite this and other struggles, Hortense never gave up. Dorothy's career ascends, taking her to new heights. She makes plans to put an emphasis on more American creations. The Lord & Taylor director believed there should be clothing made by and for the American woman. Also in 1934, the year Hortense is made president of Bonwit Teller, many employees were afraid of their new president. They still had a strong elegance to Mr. Bonwit and were unsure of their future. Hortense assured them that they would be okay and that their jobs were safe. World events begin to shift history. The economy was in shambles. While this is happening, Hortense decides to improve the hat department. She has hats moved, remodeled, and made sure they are easily seen. Hortense and Floyd shared a love for hard work, with their pioneering spirit. She then becomes determined. She became insistent on improvement, including the creation of 2 new clothing departments. Hortense's success attracts press coverage, with articles focusing on her appearance. She compared being a store president to hosting dinner parties. Bonwit Teller's slogan was, "High class but not high hat." Hortense was very self-conscious, so she had to do things in a very specific way. This led to great success, but with some very weird outcomes. Then we go back to Dorothy, fighting to get her ideas heard. By contrast, it's important that Dorothy had also started to have success. By this time, many Americans had begun to focus on France more than local fashion. However, Dorothy knew she needed to change course. Also around this time, World War II began, with France falling to Nazi Germany. This meant that Dorothy had a perfect opportunity to start shifting the tide, because trading with Europe was hard and expensive. This also resulted in the promotion of American brands, so it was truly a great time to be Dorothy. Dorothy then gets hired to redesign uniforms for Army nurses. This was a welcome upgrade from the previous all-white uniforms, as those left the nurses exposed in battlefields. We switch back again to Hortense, and she was successful at Bonwit Teller because she took what women wanted to heart. The women at the time had various problems, including what they would wear. Many women who were hired were then fired because they were married to men who worked. This meant that women really needed to decide, marriage or a career. This wasn't new, and it was increasingly hard to do both. Back to Dorothy. Many of the clothes Dorothy created were to be of, by, and for the American woman. Her goal was to create clothes that understood American life. In a time where the role of women was rapidly changing, Dorothy had the support from her bosses and the other people in her life. She is always grateful for that. They created a very special atmosphere at Lord & Taylor. More about Hortense. The Bonwit Teller store was born in the era of Ladies' Mile. But Hortense had grown up far from this place. Bonwit Teller's founder Paul Bonwit had a lot of confidence, but he was very wrong. His expansion proved unsustainable. He was forced to close both businesses. Despite Hortense's early success, she began to see business life in a negative way. She was quoted as saying that, "A woman must be needed by someone. That is her role in life." The early 1940s were a rough time. The Great Depression was a struggle, but also World War II was happening and changing the world significantly. Hortense had done everything to get where she was. This gave her the experience and motivation to get where she needed to go. She is known to many and also forgotten. The book then switches over to Geraldine Stutz, with her standing in front of her new boss, with his telling her, "You're too young." Geraldine got the job because he said, "You have style and that's the only thing we can't teach you." The early 1900s, women had taken over a lot of sales positions, but they still had to face a lot of challenges, including hard work and a boss that expected much. Dorothy at Lord & Taylor thought about her experience, including a customer's bad experience at finding clothes she wanted to purchase. This led to her focusing on making her store much more inclusive than it had been in the past. For Hortense, some things were out of reach to the young mother, so she has the perspective and drive to change things going forward. Bessie Harrison's story is brought into the story. At 16, she had to start working to support her family. Because her dad pricked his hand and got an infection, this meant that she had to go to work rather than continuing schooling. The next step for Bessie was to become a saleswoman. They sold dishes of different shapes and sizes. She spent a lot of time with the supervisor. Growing up in the pioneer town meant that Hortense really tried to get out of it. She was inspired by her grandparents' strength. She needed to get out, and New York City was her utopia. After working for a while, Bessie was very shocked when one day, Edelson, her boss, returned and they began work again. In that little box of an office on Van Ness Avenue, with a ruined city in sight from the window, I commenced to learn more about business and human nature than I ever had dreamed of, Bessie wrote of this period. She observed her boss as he negotiated with wholesale houses, bargained with jobbers eager to unload merchandise, and navigated unscrupulous salesmen who promised imported goods from Paris, but swapped them with bric-a-brac from Ohio. Bessie stayed with Edelson for 3 years, gradually promoted until she was earning a salary of $40 a week, or about $1,140 in today's dollars. Bessie was in her early 20s, and doing well enough that she moved her family out of the cramped Mission District and into a geranium-hedged neighborhood in Berkeley, across the San Francisco Bay. She helped her father open his own tailor shop, and she kept her focus on her career. Bessie's personal life, however, was not a priority. Bessie would then make a change, to pursue a higher position. Her income would then soar to $10,000 a year, or about $230,000 in today's dollars. After a lot of work and focus, she had made it. We then switch over to Geraldine and her new role, after she got offered a job with Glamour. As associate fashion editor, Geraldine was responsible for sourcing accessories, especially shoes, that were featured in the magazine's style stories. Bessie also mentioned about growing up with her father working as a tailor. Her father had to stop working because he injured himself and got sick. Going back to Hortense, the author writes about her achievements, with also looking at the difficulties, especially related to her husband and relationships with her children. There were also other problems at the time, including having many men be jobless. These issues, along with others, began to negatively impact sales at Bonwit Teller. She also took an interest in their personal concerns. Far from seeing inter-office conflict as petty squabbles, she directed everyone, no matter how junior, to come directly to her office with their issues. At times, the author inserts themselves and provides insight. This book is a great read for a variety of reasons, but still, for many, many women, they couldn't figure it out, with trying to find a balance to their work. This then had an affect with family and friends, and their support was very important. We then come back to Dorothy, and she said that, "I'd far rather have a brilliant career than a humdrum married life. There's nothing so dreadful as being bored." But the story continues, and there are many things to explore. One of the main ideas for the time, and even now, is that women are given freedom to live a dynamic life and pursue an ambition. The Great Depression in the 1930s hit department stores hard, as it did all industries and Americans. It was a real turning point, and there was no good solution, no matter what. Dorothy always worked hard to succeed and push the world of fashion forward. This led to the birth of what would be a high-flying career, with many things that are still admired today. She was a true leader for those to come, especially the women of fashion. Again, this was the focus and theme at the time. What would be the most beautiful and most helpful career? A career of a woman in their home, or a career of a woman in public, or a career for the women to do both. This then helps launch into Geraldine and her career, because there are many similarities. Also during this time, there was an article that was released describing the women's sphere and how it was growing rapidly. The author would then talk about some of the issues, but for the most part focused on all the great and powerful things that were happening at the time, which was very significant. We switch back to Hortense. Hortense's success came despite her background and where she came from and who she was as a person. She was really able to capture the attention of customers and people. But she was still the same, which made her all the better. These actions from Hortense led to even more business improvements. There were a lot of efforts to figure out what customers want or need or both. She knew as much or more than anyone else. The clothing industry is extremely competitive. You have big businesses and also individuals trying to compete with each other, fighting for market share. There were many great quotes from the time, where the news media would try and understand what made these women such a success. This has continued to grow even into today. In 1939, Bonwit was the first to do many things that a department store would do. And she had worked hard, she had a goal. Also, all women know that. The war had impacted lives in a significant way, including the fact that everyone has to be involved in war. Because otherwise it might not be as successful as it could be, which was a great point. The war was a major changing point in how the world will function, because the world at that point really did change. More about Dorothy at the end. With this and more, there was also a thought that the way to the soul, or heart, is by making the person look so attractive and stunning, but in a good way. But even so, Dorothy would continue to improve her business and also keep it moving forward, but was also careful about what she said, because she was in the public eye. There were many different articles written about this at the time. This was what women needed, and the women needed to be able to share the right way. With some issues, these women would even consult Dorothy. After discussing a lot, Dorothy mentioned how some may even need to consider whether or not it was good or bad, to consider what was right and what was wrong. And also, what is good? This was a lesson she learned all her own. So this was a turning point, where it was an accomplishment. It was something you were doing and there was an understanding of things. So, this was important. Dorothy also wanted to make sure people had the right things to wear. No matter what is going on in their lives, to not allow anything to define you. She wanted to try to make sure people were feeling well, no matter their circumstances. She also discussed how having the right friends and the right team was super important, and working well with others and building them up, rather than yourself, was very, very critical. Dorothy had a very unique life that a lot of people might not know about, but was really important. To be able to show some of that is great. Let's pivot now to what Geraldine had to go through and her various accomplishments. Geraldine was really able to change the minds and thoughts of others. With all of these and more, there was an increase at 40%, the increase of some of the merchandise. That was absolutely great. And with this, there are so many women who also knew these thoughts for their lives, which was absolutely very great to see and know that it existed throughout a lot of the history. Let's switch back to Hortense, her life and career. What would she have to say? So we explore much more now. She would talk about what to do for you, or talk about what to talk about. This would help and allow everything to continue to grow, or give whatever was helpful while the person was there. So all of those and more were very important to understand and to implement, as is the ability to work with all people and what happens with that. Then after that, after all was said and done, Hortense's time is over. But it was something beautiful and also very nice. However, it is very important that there was a specific reason to make something. Not many reasons, but maybe one reason. It was a very good thing to do. She made it so her performance would stay, and as a result, this continued very well. Dorothy, as president of Lord & Taylor, became the highest-paid female executive in the country. She made decisions with the customers in mind, so it is really cool. When it comes to fashion at the time, with what you said as a woman. We now have a very special, good, interesting career. That was very, very nice. In 1920, there was much and more emphasis on people. These were all key aspects. You also need some training in how to work it out to really help. Because it's absolutely right. A great business. As is the ability to start that at this point. This is a great time to have a company that is more than just one kind of this. It was important to put women in the highest positions, for them to earn the money, for that person to make it work. Dorothy would then ask for women to be judged and think and live as normally as possible. This helped many things to keep going at that point. This resulted with a lot more to follow. And there have been many comments and people being very happy with these changes. Because there are so many. So what we also try to think. And she does tell you. But I have discovered such and more of that. We could tell you to try to sell, but it might also be something else entirely. But in the next little while it was very interesting to figure that out. Because everything that happened from there was very important. She made great achievements, and we do like those people that were able to make those points. So she made the most important parts and put in the power of where she was going. And finally, she got back as where we could start all over again. It is a great pleasure to see all those, and a lot of people had to understand what was going on. And then all that to do, with a lot of people, and a lot of power to do so, and all that. The final thing that she really had was the power that women should feel like they could take themselves seriously and make their own thing happen and be what they want to be. Finally, the history of the thing, and that is not to be forgotten. You get it? The overall takeaway of When Women Ran Fifth Avenue is that it can provide a look into a time where there was great change happening. Some heuristics. Women can lead and also succeed in difficult and also challenging situations. Women can have successful and great lives, no matter what those will be like. Thanks for watching. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you never miss our next book dive.